President Trump and the Republicans are finally going to get what they've wanted, but as they say, they ought to be careful what they wish for, because now the American public will hear directly from officials involved in the Ukraine mess. After weeks of testimony behind closed doors, the first televised impeachment hearings, they're set for next Wednesday and Friday. A week from today, we will hear from State Department official George Kent and Acting Ambassador to Ukraine Bill Taylor. Kent has testified he was told to lay low by a superior when he raised concerns about Rudy Giuliani. More about Taylor in a moment. Then, next Friday, Marie Yovanovitch will testify. She, the career diplomat who was shown the door after the scandal blew up. She testified that Rudy Giuliani and his allies wanted her out, and Mike Pompeo and others didn't have her back and allowed it all to go down. Now let's go back to Taylor. We already know that Taylor was the first official to testify that there was indeed a quid pro quo with Ukraine. Since then, several other people have confirmed it, and today, the White House Intelligence, or I should say the House Intelligence Committee, released the full transcript of his hearing. It included this statement, quote, "By mid-July, it was becoming clear to me that the White House meeting with President Zelensky was conditioned on investigations of Burisma and alleged Ukrainian influence in the 2016 elections. It was also clear that this condition was driven by the irregular policy channel I had come to understand was guided by Mr. Giuliani." Democrats are saying they feel Taylor will be a star witness, and Republicans in that same committee are very scared about just how strong he'll come across on network TV. Then there is the specter of the Supreme Court taking up a case that could be a game changer about presidential power. We already know the president's lawyers have recently even argued that he could literally go out on Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and not get into any trouble as a sitting president. Very shortly, the High Court may decide to take the case and rule on whether or not that's actually true. The case it concerns the Manhattan DA's subpoena of Trump's tax records over 8 years, looking into the hush money payments that he made here to women who they claim had affairs with Trump. A federal appeals court rejected Trump's request to block the subpoena. If the Supreme Court takes the case, it could essentially be ruling on whether or not the president can, in essence, be above the law. Well, joining us now is former federal prosecutor and good friend to the program, Roland Riopelle. And Roland, first off, the optics of this, because we know this at the end is not going to be a legal trial, this will be a political trial. The public will decide whether or not they believe the president ought to be removed, and depending on the poll numbers, really, lawmakers, meaning 20 Republicans in the Senate, will have to decide, if it gets to them, whether or not they'll join the other Democrats in theory here and be the two-thirds necessary to remove the president. From all accounts, and more importantly than what Democrats are saying, what Republicans are privately saying, that Taylor comes across as an unimpeachable witness, and it will be devastating on live TV what he'll say about the president, let alone what Ms. Yovanovitch and also Mr. Kent will say. Do you think the president has reason to worry?
I don't think the president has reason to worry about removal from office. I just think that he so controls his base, they will stick to him no matter how bad the testimony is. And if that is so, I don't think 20 Republican senators will desert the fold and vote to have Mr. Trump removed from office. I do think it should make Mr. Trump very nervous about re-election, though, given the election results we saw last night in places like Kentucky, a thoroughly red state that elected a blue governor for the first time in some years. I think Mr. Trump should be worried that this is going to so damage him politically that he'll have a hard time getting reelected in 2020. But, Richard, it's hard for me to see that he'll be removed from office by the Senate, although I'm sure he'll be impeached.
To that end, I want to backtrack for a second, because you saw Sondland do a complete 180 as suddenly his memory got jogged after other testimony that, oh yeah, there was a quid pro quo. To that end, we've seemingly gotten the whistleblower's contentions had been confirmed, reconfirmed, and reconfirmed above that from first-person accounts, forget about third-person accounts. Is there additional pieces of information that if they came to light would be more than just saying the president tried to do this, he was either too inept or he didn't have to follow through to really withhold the $400 million he clearly wanted to until he got the Ukrainian president again in front of a camera? That more than trying to do it, is there something else that could come to light that in your eyes would be so substantial that it'd be hard to say, we have not witnessed a high crime and a misdemeanor, just like the Founding Fathers warned us about?
Well, I think the allegations that, based on the reporting, seem to be proven right now are pretty clearly the sort of high crime and misdemeanor that the Founding Fathers were so worried about. They were very worried about foreign influence and foreign intervention in our democratic process, and that's exactly what Mr. Trump was soliciting from Ukraine. So that's exactly the kind of thing that ought to be an impeachable offense that would lead to removal from office if we follow the Constitution and what the Founding Fathers envisioned. But the truth is, Mr. Trump has the Republican Party, or at least a large part of it, in a stranglehold. And I just don't know that it will desert him. Now, one thing, Richard, that I think we should look out for is, the reports that Lev Parnas, one of the sort of co-conspirators with Rudy Giuliani, one of these Ukraine individuals that was picked up and charged with a crime just recently, appears to be cooperating with the Southern District of New York, and his information may somehow bring to light something that is earth-shattering, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Potentially, it could be even money laundering, et cetera, that has been going on, that a lot of people have said for years may have been part of the practice.
Oh, yeah.
Now, first guess for me, whether or not you believe Roberts is going to take on the case that's, as we said, percolating in New York, and the judge already said, no, you don't have absolute power as the executive branch. They have every right to get their hands on these returns as it's critical to the investigation. Do you think Roberts will take the case, and if he does, won't he basically be answering the question as to whether or not, we have a king or we have a president, that there is possible exposure, and it was the own attorneys of the president who made the contention he could shoot somebody in broad daylight in Fifth Avenue and have no criminal exposure? Will that question finally get answered, do you think?
I believe that the Supreme Court will take the case because it is very important to answer this question. And I believe that Justice Roberts will vote with those justices, and there will be at least 4 others who I believe will rule that the president's tax returns are fair game and he is not above the law in terms of his having to disclose his tax returns. So yes, I believe they'll take the case. I believe that the ruling will be that the tax returns must be disclosed. Whether it'll be 9-0 like it was in the Nixon impeachment case or not, I can't say, because there are a couple of real serious Trump partisans, at least, on the Supreme Court now, in a way that Nixon didn't have allies who were this committed to him. But I do believe a majority of the court will rule that Mr. Trump's tax returns must be produced.
And if for any reason they rule the other way, the very premise that we believe, and the Founding Fathers made clear what they wanted when they outlined this country, the idea of checks and balances, the idea of oversight, that goes out the window, because it basically would be ratifying that the president can do whatever he wants, no one gets to say he gets to go too far, and to his own attorney's contention, he can murder somebody, and just because he calls Pennsylvania Avenue home, he'd be above the law. I mean, that literally, without hyperbole, is what we're trying to clarify the standards of 3 branches of government, and does the second one, the legislative branch, have any job?
Yeah, well, that's right, Richard. I think we've seen that the presidency is not functioning within its normal limits. The legislative branch, because the Republicans controlled it and they still control the Senate, is not going to provide a true check and balance on the president, because ordinarily we would expect them to remove him from office here, the way they did Richard Nixon, for much less than what Mr. Trump's gotten away with so far. And the last remaining check on the president will be the court system, which so far has functioned pretty well, despite the shenanigans by Attorney General Barr and the Justice Department, which is itself not functioning normally as a check on the president. The last fence here, the last guardrail, is the court system. So far it's held up pretty well. We'll see what happens. If it falls, then yes, we've gone over to a complete dictatorship and there's nothing left of the Constitution.
There's a parallel trial going on right now with our friend Mr. Stone. Turns out Bannon is going to be testifying against him. Should we be paying attention to what's going on in that trial, and will it have any implications to the conversations we've been having about the ongoing impeachment inquiry?
I think we should pay some attention to it because, Mr. Stone was right in the middle of the contacts with Russia by the Trump campaign. And it's possible that evidence will come out in that trial that will add to the evidence that exists, that the Russians did do a great deal to manipulate the 2016 election. So we may have some real lightning bolts come out of the Stone trial, and it is well worth watching. I'm sure if there are lightning bolts, we'll hear about them. The media will be all over it.
Which is exactly what Mr. Stone would like, it seems. Roland, thank you as always. It will be a busy week and a half ahead of us here, and I'm sure we're going to be checking in for some counsel on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. It'll be good to come back.
You got it. All right, everybody, when we come back, we're going to take a look at results from election night last night, and we'll explain why this could give us a lot of information about next year's elections.